Welcome to the Stories Told podcast. This is episode 4, Disturbed Earth. Science fiction, fantasy, time travel. This is the Stories Told podcast, talking about worlds of stories told, from movies to TV shows and, of course, books. I'm E.W. Barnes, fiction author and avid fan of great stories. Thousands of years, thousands of worlds, thousands of stories told. Let's begin. Today I'm talking about episode 4 of the new Lord of the Rings series, The Rings of Power, which is streaming now on Amazon. And as you probably know by now, beyond here there will be spoilers. So if you've not already seen the show and don't want to know what's going to happen, now is the time to click over to a cozy ambience video. This episode is entitled The Great Wave, and there is so much going on in this episode it felt like a movie instead of a TV series. It was exciting, engaging, and even a little frustrating too. But more on that in a moment. This episode focused on 3 main character storylines: Galadriel and Míriel, Arondir and Bronwyn, and Elrond and Durin. The episode opens with a scene of Queen Míriel blessing babies. When the island of Númenor begins to shake, the quaking gets stronger. Míriel goes to a window and sees a wall of water rushing toward her, drowning everything. And then she wakes from a dream. We know from The Lord of the Rings that Númenor is under threat from this doom, based on these lines from the chapter The Council of Elrond. Of Númenor he spoke, its glory and its fall, and the return of the kings of men to Middle-earth, out of the deeps of the sea, borne upon the wings of storm. I was still relieved when it was revealed to be a dream, and we realized that Míriel is trying to navigate a dangerous road. She knows from her own use of a palantir, which she does share with Galadriel, that the downfall of Númenor will happen unless she can prevent it. She's convinced that Galadriel's arrival on Númenor has started them on the path to destruction and insists that Galadriel leave. But when she does, the petals from the white tree start to fall, signaling the danger to the island. She decides to agree to Galadriel's proposal that the men of Númenor go to Middle-earth to fight against the orcs in the Southland. We see very little of Halbrand in this episode, but what we see is significant. In the recap at the beginning of this episode, we see him again in a fight with several men after stealing a medallion that would have enabled him to be a blacksmith on Númenor. The recap spotlighted Halbrand's horrible breaking of a man's arm. The first time we saw it, it was kind of lost in all the action. Now we see it again, and it suddenly feels unusual. Halbrand spends this episode in a cell, and here we see a manipulative side of him. First, he tells Galadriel to find out what Míriel fears, in order to get her to agree to Galadriel's request. Then he is persuasive with Pharazôn, after Galadriel breaks away from her Númenorian guard. Halbrand arrived on the island at the same time as Galadriel, and he's a smith. Cue dramatic music. Arondir is still in the clutches of the orcs, waiting for judgment from Adar for his attempted escape. We finally see Adar as he kills a dying orc to stop his suffering, and we learn that Adar means father in Orcish. And we see that Adar appears to be part elf, part orc. He speaks the elf language to Arondir and recalls being near the land of Arondir's birth. Arondir tells Adar that he was born in Beleriand. Beleriand was a land to the west of Middle-earth, which was destroyed in the battle with Morgoth, who was essentially Sauron's boss. Beleriand sank beneath the sea and is no more. Adar tells Arondir that he will let him go if he carries a message for him. Meanwhile, Bronwyn is overseeing the settling of refugees in the tower that was left behind by the elves when the High King Gil-galad recalled them after concluding that Middle-earth was free from evil. Many are coming, all the way from Orodruin, Bronwyn says, which, of course, another name for Orodruin, is Mount Doom. They are running out of food. All the game animals are dying mysteriously or have fled. So Bronwyn's son secretly leaves to find food, but is chased by orcs because he is carrying a special sword hilt that he stole out of a neighbor's home. The hilt sometimes erupts into flame and reacts to his blood, which lets us know that this is not a weapon of goodness. Theo is captured by the orcs and then saved by Arondir, who afterwards conveys Adar's message to Bronwyn, that they submit to him as their ruler. I loved the orcs slow-mo in this episode, both when they bow at the approach of Adar and later when they're chasing Arondir and Theo through a forest. There's some amazing drama as Arondir and Theo run through the forest to a clearing where the rising sun saves them. The scene was well-paced and exciting. We meet Elrond and Celebrimbor again and get some more delicious backstory. This time, Elrond talks about his father, Eärendil the Mariner. We've heard of Eärendil before, both in the Lord of the Rings books where Bilbo writes a poem about him, and also in the movie when Galadriel refers to him as she gives Frodo her gift. I give you the light of Eärendil, our most beloved star. As a little background, Eärendil took one of the Silmarils, which were crafted by Fëanor and stolen by Morgoth, thereby starting the wars in Middle-earth, back to the Undying Lands to ask for help from the Valar, the gods of the Undying Lands, to battle Morgoth. The Valar agreed to help, which is what led to the overthrow of Morgoth and the destruction of Beleriand. Eärendil was not allowed to return to Middle-earth, and he and his ship were placed in the sky as a star instead. Celebrimbor senses that Durin is hiding something and sends Elrond to find out what's going on. Eventually, after a series of scenes with Durin's wife Disa, who I really love, such a great character, I am happy to watch as much Disa as I can get. Durin tells Elrond about the mithril the dwarves have discovered. But the mithril is dangerous to mine, and even as they talk about it, there's a cave-in trapping several dwarves. Disa sings to the rocks, asking them to release the dwarves unharmed. It's a wonderful layer of dwarf culture and a well-done scene. So what do we know at the end of this episode? Miriel is trying to save Numenor. What we think about Halbrand may be wrong. Arondir and Bronwyn cannot defeat Adar and the orcs without help. I titled this podcast episode Disturbed Earth because in each storyline, the world itself communicated the uncertainties to come. The earthquakes in Numenor in Miriel's dream, the death and decay in the lands the orcs have invaded, and the cave-in and danger risked to mine mithril. And here's what I found frustrating watching this episode. It was a revelation about how much I expected to know what was going to happen in this series, and I don't. I know these stories, except I realize there's so much time that passes with only a single sentence or two from Tolkien, leaving the road our heroes traveled to the places in the story described by those sentences wide open and possibly very windy. Which means I'm left guessing what's going to happen next. Cool. On a scale from 1 to 10, I give this episode a 9. And so the questions yet to be answered are, is Halbrand a viper in their midst? Who is Adar, and what does he want with the sword hilt? And will Bronwyn and Arondir and the refugees be rescued? And that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you for being here. Join me next time when we talk about The Rings of Power, Episode 5. See you then.